Okay, and we are live. Hello, welcome to Fermenting Opinions Hangout. I'm your host, David Papiden.
And your co-host, James McVeigh.
And we are Fermenting Opinions, the podcast and Google Hangout, in search of a more palatable political ferment. Tonight, we have on deck, we're going to be talking about the Nunes Memo. Oh, there's some loud noise. Okay. We're going to be talking about the Nunes Memo, the SpaceX launch, and our immortal army parading through the streets of DC. I get like I feel like
the best laugh.
I seriously, when I see like about the military parades, we may not be doing this in order. When I see stuff about the military parades, I almost like cut to like anime level hyperbole about like how great an army is. Like,
yeah, I mean, guys, let's stow that one. You know, I mean, I feel like that's gonna just be a whole lot of critique and a lot of dear leader references. But we can get into the why in the fuck are we bringing 70-ton tanks down Pennsylvania Avenue? But that way.
Right. Let's table that for a moment.
Mm-hmm.
Let's start by talking about the Nunes memo that came out last Friday. It was so really not that long ago. It already feels like a whole cycle and a million things have happened since then. That is the nature of politics today. It's like you wait 3 days and the landscape's entirely different. But basically, this thing, and I'm just sort of going off the cuff on the high notes of this thing. That sort of it's accused essentially the sort of a spurious and highly motivated nature behind seeking these FISA warrants on Carter Page to basically surveil him in his interactions and stuff.
Yeah.
And the memo itself is calling out basically that they use the Steele dossier. The Steele dossier is biased.
Here are the problems with the Steele dossier.
Here are the problems with the Steele dossier. Comey himself said a lot of what is in the dossier is salacious and unverified. Everyone thinks of like the P tapes kind of thing as part.
I like to refer to it as the Russian Pea Party, but. All right, but yeah,
the R. Kelly stand-in.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because people think of like the most ridiculous aspects of it, and it's true that it is salacious and some of it is unverified, and that what has since then been verified, or that we think has been verified, you know, a lot of that are corroborated.
There are at least admissions in the Nunes memo. I believe the Nunes memo refers to it as minimally corroborated, but there's some corroboration in there. Like we know that part.
And it's important to point out that just because, and I think as I read it, and of course I'm partisan and biased myself. I'm a horrible liberal Democrat, whatever. I know I'm all of those terrible, awful things. That I read this thing and I think that they cherry pick that quote about salacious and unverified deliberately. Because if there are things that can be corroborated from the Steele dossier, that the idea is that it's still falling under that term was used in a blanket sense to give people, and essentially I think this is not really intending to have any legal weight, but it's to persuade people that the Mueller investigation is all a bunch of bollocks, and that that we can dismiss it as nothing burger, hot air. Liberal conspiracy theory, what have you, and using basically this one phrase, salacious and unverified, with regards to some aspects of the Steele dossier, and I don't think anybody would or should dispute that. It doesn't mean all aspects of the Steele dossier, or that there's no merit to it. And what's important to point out is that this the warrant was renewed twice.
Yes, basically the way FISA warrants work is you are submitting an application or an affidavit that says, these are the facts as I know them that go towards probable cause. You put them in front of a judge. The judge reads the affidavit that you're swearing to be true. and says, okay, there's enough here for it to be more likely than not that Carter Page is a Russian agent, whether willingly or unwillingly. And you can wiretap him, essentially.
Right.
And it has to be renewed every 90 days. Normally, the renewal will happen after about 60 days because they don't want to risk, missing the gap and not getting their warrant back.
Gotcha.
So you can assume every 60 to 80 days, the warrant was renewed.
And the important thing,
it was renewed 2 times.
And the important thing about the renewals is for people who are sort of motivated to believe that this is all hot air, that it's all, fabricated, conspiracy against Trump because they just hate him so much. Like, they had to uncover evidence using those wiretaps, using that surveillance on him in order to be able to renew the FISA warrant.
Yes. Now,
they had to get actual dirt using the warrant in order to renew it.
Yes.
And they did that twice.
They have to have learned something new. You can still rely on old data to help renew the application warrant, but you're going to have to show that there's a reason to continue the surveillance, basically. Right. You're going to show the new stuff that you got. You got to basically be like, okay, well, we had these cards, and based on the cards we had, this is what we just got now, and it confirms this, or that, but we need to keep going.
Gotcha. Okay, and so the other, I guess I look at this as sort of 2 horns, and the other horn is the fact that in sort of the top of the memo, they talk about, the Steele dossier, very biased, Steele very much against Trump himself. This was a product of Oppo research. And that was not included, apparently, in the application. Apparently. No, we don't actually know that because we don't actually know the content of the application. This is what Nunes is saying. Mm-hmm. And it may very well be the case that it's not included. And what he, according to the verbiage of the memo, that's a problem because they're supposed to, not legally required, but supposed to include information that should be helpful to Page in this application for a warrant, and that wasn't included, and that would be helpful. Personally, I don't see that as exculpatory. What's up?
I was going to say, out of our panel of guests, I'd like to ask, have any of you guys read the Nunes memo?
About half of it.
I have not.
I'm not all the way through.
Melissa, did you?
I've been quite lazy.
Melissa, can you hear me?
No, I have not read the memo.
Okay, just wondering. Okay, so essentially, what the memo says, the implication is, as David was giving us, was that there is partisan bias in this investigation, and specifically around Carter Page's FISA applications, is that the FBI knew or should have known that their entire investigation was a fraud, and it was based on Hillary Clinton's desire, essentially, to frame Donald Trump for colluding with Russia.
And if you read the Daily Wire, that's exactly what they told you.
That is not true. Oh, God.
I read the Daily Wire article. It was really my motivation. This whole thing, when we were talking with Ben Watkins, who was our podcast guest earlier. No, seriously, that basically that was my opening comment.
It says nothing's there. That's what the conclusion of the Daily Wire article that Hudgens posted was, or whoever.
No, that they lied and like.
Yeah, but also they accuse Nunes of
they said no. They said they lied, and then later in the article said, "Well, it was a lie of omission." Like with regards to disclosing,
man, we must be talking about
that the Steele dossier being, of a partisan bias against Trump.
Well, and this is where
But the point is they said lie.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's all people who are your regular Daily Wire.
If I remember correctly,
readers.
Actually, the way it's phrased is, if you're to believe the Nunes memo, it's a lie. I mean, I objectively read the thing, like I read the Nunes memo. Okay. I parsed it out by
I invite you to reread that.
I have
they basically. I mean, the Wire article.
I know. If that's what I'm saying is, if we're talking about the same article, the one about like 5 takeaways from this bombshell.
Right. What you're supposed to think about it.
3 of those takeaways are this article's bullshit. 2 of them are. This is really concerning. Or disconcerting.
I don't think others came to that same conclusion.
Well, they didn't read it because people are using confirmation bias to see a couple of things they like. But the article itself really was fairly objective. I mean, and I'm not trying to defend the Daily Wire as a news source.
You just did.
It's like the Daily. No, that's not. Yeah, it's one article. Look at it objectively. You know, like stop the whole confirmation bias. It's the same route.
How can you? I mean, you can
condemning
objectively look at a
everything-
partisan rag and say it's a partisan
And
rag.
you're condemning everything written by that partisan rag is absolutely fallacious.
No, I didn't say everything. I said their
That
initial
article?
allegation is that they lied on the application, and then part of their conclusion was, oh, well, it was a lie of omission.
Yeah,
Which is in itself almost a tacit
if-
admission that they're engaged in hyperbole.
It's a conditional conclusion if you believe what the memo says. I mean,
I have a question.
Yeah,
This is
please.
probably like a really,
Bring
really,
this
really
up.
stupid question,
No, you're
but
fine.
has Nunes seen any of the primary sources?
No.
Like, he hasn't seen the FISA.
Not from what we've heard. Actually, Nunes. I don't even know if Nunes has a classification clearance back yet. His was stripped from him.
Because he recused himself from the investigation, right?
Well, he did do that, but he was actually stripped of classification clearance because of his recusal and everything. Like they showed his bias and his giving classified documents secretly to Trump that he got through the investigative committee, and then they stripped him of his classification clearance. I don't know if he ever got it back or not. I know he was cleared of that charge. I don't know if he's gotten his classification merits back or not, but according to the Democratic rebuttal and also the Democrat press releases and everything that came out after the Nunes memo was released, was that Nunes has not read any of the primary source documents.
That's right. That's what I thought. I just wasn't.
Right. He basically he's getting it secondhand.
He just signed it.
And
he never read it.
Has compiled this. Yeah, and this doesn't actually disclose what's in the application, the actual content of the application, or how they went about finding, probable cause. Essentially,
and this is kind of what we broke down on the podcast. The general consensus, or the actual legal framework you have to look at this through to see if it was unconstitutional or not, if something actually hinky happened, is going to be based on: did the DOJ/FBI know that they made false statements? Or were those statements even false as made at the time? And if they were false when they were made, were they recklessly made without investigating?
Right. It was also suggestive of, because Steele, if you guys, for the full context of the memo, he also leaked to
Yahoo News.
I guess information from the dossier. Or he was just in communication with
that news article was used, and it was cited throughout.
Hey, someone's got some kind of, I don't know what the hell.
Someone playing the drums?
Something's going on. Anyway,
Brandon, are you beatboxing over there?
No.
Baby, it's not me. I don't have rhythm.
Don't blame me.
Okay, so there was
I didn't know what it was.
There was an article Yahoo News put out September 23rd of 2016 that the FBI or DOJ or whatever on their application used to corroborate the Steele memo. Turns out the information in that article was anonymously sourced from, guess who? Steele. But that brings the question, and then the memo then says, we learned this as it came to light in British court filings. So that begs the question, though, did the FBI know at the time that they used it, these things were false? It seems the DOS or the Nunes memo actually goes on to say, no, they didn't know, but they should. Well, how should they have known? Again, you have to look at it of, were the statements intentionally false? Were the statements recklessly made with disregard for the truth, or was there a reckless disregard for the truth? Or did they just simply not know? That's how you have to look at sources in an application.
Right, and all that, you can take all that and also consider that this was not necessarily the only source in the application for the FISA warrant.
This
is just one source.
The big question is, what does the actual application say?
Right.
You need to look at the affidavit and see what all was said to see if is the entire thing based on the Steele dossier and this Yahoo News article. I kind of doubt it, but if it is, then you have serious problems here.
That's my question, though, because the memo reads as if Nunes saw the FISA application. If he hasn't seen it, how do we know that there was information that was, not disclosed as he's alleging?
His staffers wrote the memo and he signed it. you would assume that his staffers did read the applications because they're asserting facts from the applications. So they read it. Someone read it. They're just cherry picking things, is what it looks like. Who knows? Because we haven't seen the FISA application, so I can't tell you what it says or what it doesn't say. You know, as an example, one of the things, the first, I guess, bullet point that the memo goes into is that, that there was no mention anywhere in the article or in the application that that the DNC or the Clinton campaign funded the dossier. Okay. Legally speaking, there's no requirement the government turn that information over. Yeah,
that's what I'm referring to about that.
It's good practice. It's good practice. If there's political bent to some of your information, you should at least footnote that. At the very least, there should be a footnote that says this was opposition research and include other evidence, you know, something along those lines, or other assertions of fact.
But I guess if I was
assertions, not assertions. Sorry.
And again, I think we're all in conjecture land here with this. But like, as a pushback against that, like, is it even a question that the source of this information was politically, you know, biased? That it was from Oppo Research? That it was like, you know, oh, here's what we're using to obtain the FISA warrant.
Okay. I mean, let's look at it.
You know what this is, where it comes from.
Yeah.
And other news water is wet. Like, it's so obvious that the bias exists.
We don't know what the rest of it is, but let's talk about Christopher Steele. I mean, Steele himself has proven time and time again to be a reliable resource for the FBI and warrants. They've used him for Russian research for the last decade or so since he went into the private sector. Before that, he was head of the MI6 Russia desk for a while. And before that, he spent like 20 or 30 years on the MI6 Russia desk. He's one of the world premier sources of reliability as far as Russian spying goes. I mean, he's been...
Yeah, hasn't he basically been on with Russia,
he has been
researching Russia for like 25 years or something crazy?
He has cooperated with the federal government of the United States for about a decade of reliable resource information on Russia spying. So, I mean, they have no reason not to consider him a reliable resource. When they found out that he was leaking information against the policy, he was burned and he was terminated as a source. He became less than reliable. He was removed. The question becomes, when did that happen? And did the FBI have reason to believe that he was unreliable
at the time of the initial application
when they used his work to get these FISA applications? And we don't know because the Nunes Memo doesn't say that. The Nunes Memo is clear about specific dates, about the Yahoo News article, about the Mother Jones article that ultimately led to him being burned, which, by the way, happened October 30th after the initial FISA application was submitted. We don't know when the FBI learned that he provided this information to Mother Jones on October 30th or whatever. That article was published October 30th. The initial FISA application was already out. We don't really know when the FBI burned it. And the memo doesn't say because it's highly classified information, just like we don't know when in October the FISA warrant was actually applied for because that's highly classified information. Yeah. The Nunes Memo is very weak on details, except for the details that kind of pitch this idea.
Gotcha. We've been talking here a little bit. Brandon, Melissa, you guys been quiet a little while. You guys have any feedback or your thoughts or opinions on things?
I can, to be honest, I haven't really been paying a whole lot of anything right now with my back being all jacked up. But what I have been able to gather, and it's just par for the course, you know, the tribes have gathered their people to their sides, and you know, the whole issue is going to be viewed through one color lenses as opposed to the other side. So to me, it's just more politics as usual.
Yeah, I
think that's actually a pretty valid point. To me, this almost seemed like a 1-2, like a two-part Rorschach test between the State of the Union and this. That you will take it to mean what you want it to.
Well, yeah.
Union. If you loved everything Trump had to say and agreed with it, or you wanted to pick apart and just hate on him to hell and back for everything, like it's just, you know, that's that's what you're trying to say.
It just blows my mind that you're very far right ring. I can't even talk. Hello, muscle relaxer. The far right wing component of the party is pointing and saying, see, we told you, it's all a big conspiracy. This exonerates him fully. And then the far left faction of America didn't prove anything. So I don't know what you're talking about. And then there's all this bip, 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 bip. And, I just don't, I'm honestly, guys, I'm at the point now that I'm encouraging people to find a hobby. Because
but this is my hobby.
Yeah, I mean, this is insane. But I mean, that leads me to a good question because Melissa, I know you to be a very reasonable conservative. After this memo was released, or right around the time it was released, one of my favorite congressional investigators, Trey Gowdy, was just like, "Fuck it, I quit." His response was, "This is a big nothing burger. This does not affect the Mueller investigation. I am not running for re-election. I want to return to the justice system because I'm sick of politics."
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I think that's extremely
I don't blame
telling.
him.
I mean, I think it's really
Or he
telling
wants a
in the sense
judgeship.
of how hard he went after. He might want a judgeship too because there's going to be spots open on his circuit. But he went hard after Hillary Clinton. I mean, he went hard. He made a name for himself doing it. We all knew who Trey Gowdy was during the House congressional hearings because he was beating the shit out of her. She had an 11-hour hearing, and half of it was Trey Gowdy embarrassing her, and her being like, "What does it matter?" And he's like, "Well, ma'am, it matters because we have federal laws," and there was a huge thing there. But when Trey Gowdy gets this memo and reads it and says, "Fuck it, I don't even want to be in politics anymore."
Yeah.
I think we have a problem.
Do you really think that this is what precipitated his exit from politics?
Boy, they coincided real close, didn't they?
Yeah, well, correlation does not equal causation.
That's
either.
true, but I mean, his statement to leave.
He could have made a bunch of money in the private
statement,
sector. He might be positioning, like I said, for a
well,
judgeship.
he did make a fair amount of money. Well, a couple million in the private sector, but
just.
Well,
it's crumbs. It's crumbs.
I won't tell you what I made.
He was there for 8 years. I mean,
but I appreciate the whiskey.
I'm saying, well, I mean, he was there for 8 years. It's 4 terms. So, I mean, whatever. But
well, I think that it's an honorable thing to do. I think that 4 terms for a representative is plenty enough time to be in Congress. I think that it's, regardless of what his rationale is for stepping down, not running for re-election, whatever his reasoning is, I think it's something that all politicians need to step back and find out. Who are they in this for? Are you in this for your own personal gain, or are you really actually honestly doing something to serve the people, your constituents? Because I guarantee you that's because they're never going to vote term limits for themselves.
Well, that's exactly what Gowdy was saying, was that he was like, I got into this to make a difference on the national stage, away from when I was a U.S. attorney, because he wasn't an assistant U.S. attorney. He ran a U.S. attorney's office. He was an actual appointed U.S. attorney. And then he quit to join politics to try to make a difference. He's very conservative, but at the same time, he was just like, this is a game. I don't like it. This is dirty and stupid. And I want to get back to the justice system where things are fair and we actually care about fairness. That happened the same day the Nunes Memo was released. And he also commented on the Nunes Memo and said, this in no way impedes Mueller's investigation. This is a bunch of smoke and mirrors.
I think it's again, Crowley's deeply conservative. I don't really like his politics, but I can acknowledge the 2 points here, the self-imposed term limits, which it's not unique to him, but I think that's a good trend. He's right. They by and large are not going to vote themselves to have term limits. Be damned the will of the people. But that and the fact that
I find it.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, David. I was just going to say I find it very funny that we call ourselves a representative government, and the only office at the federal level that we actually have any control over, with any small fraction, is the presidency, because that inherent in that role. You've got your 2 terms and you're out. But you can put someone in there like Nancy Pelosi or Who was it? Harry Reid. God, I thought he would never leave.
Yeah, I mean, we all did, but of course, the senators go by.
We even had when we had Stephen Reynolds here for interview. And he's running for U.S. Congress.
House of Representatives.
Yeah, and he said himself that he wanted to do two terms, excuse me, and then he would voluntarily step down after that. Like, I think that's cool, and
I thought so too. Now, I don't know if I believe him, but at the same time, I do find him genuine in the sense that normally I consider a successful businessman who's a Democrat to be an oxymoron. but he is a very successful businessman running as a Democrat and on democratic ideals.
Sure.
So I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. I mean,
but he's also got some libertarian leanings, so you should.
Well, he does.
He should be a little bit nicer.
Anyway.
I like both of the primary candidates that we interviewed. I think they're both good people.
I did too.
Are both good candidates.
Mariah Phillips.
I wish them both well. But I was making the point that Reynolds said he would voluntarily step down. Why? Because he knows. I think that's something that the people approve of.
That's very.
I think he would do it honestly.
And I mean, honestly, a lot of we always gloss over this, but a lot of politicians actually do that. A lot of people
even.
Announce not running again and say, I hit my 2 terms, I'm done.
Only Nixon can go to China moment. Even Sheila Butt voluntarily stepped down because she could run. She could put her name on the ballot and win.
Yeah.
I know that.
Well, she has an R next
to her. And you know how little I personally like her. I won't go into that. But I can respect the fact that she's voluntarily decided to not run again and go do other things and let somebody else sort of have a turn at the wheel. I can respect that. If nothing else about her, I can respect that.
Oh, come on. Okay, look, I've met Sheila Butt several times. She is a lovely person.
Does God love Michael's two dads?
She is.
That's sort of the beginning in it. That's the alpha and omega.
Look, and I get it.
And the Christian
you have to work. You have to work really hard to become a national joke that's made fun of on television as a state representative from a podunk district of the 64th. I get that. I think. Let's not disparage her too much. She is a very nice woman. I don't know if you've ever met her. She's.
I've never personally.
She is. Yeah. So I mean, don't look at her as like some specter you can beat up on. She's a lovely.
And I try to be. And I'm friends with Eric Pavetti, who's a commissioner. Yeah, Eric, you got to shout out whether or not you like it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just saying. She's a lovely person.
And they've been like lifelong friends.
I'm adamantly opposed to 99.9% of her policy positions because they're garbage. But
I know Melissa, I know you like her too, and I'm not trying to be.
But she's
hateful,
a lovely person.
But like, there's it engenders
I think
an ugliness. But go ahead.
Well, I think you have to be careful with things like that because there are several people that that I've known for decades, almost all my life. Some of them are diametrically opposed to the things that I believe. And I could say, one or the other of us would say, well, that's just an evil thought. You're just an evil person. But you got to separate the beliefs from the person. I don't think that someone holding those beliefs necessarily constitutes an evil intent. Sometimes it takes education. Sometimes it takes exposure. Sometimes it takes experience. But you can't say that someone, coming from her background, where she does, it's very Bible Belt background that she's coming from. So she hasn't had the exposure as someone in Philadelphia or San Francisco. So there's not that. It's not as commonplace to have those beliefs.
I think it's important to not dehumanize the candidate that you're criticizing.
It's
hard not to do. I get it.
I think seriously, the whole one of the big things behind fermenting opinions, and this is a moment of vulnerability or whatever, is that part of it for me is trying to let go of the hate, right? Because I see people like Sheila Butt, Donna Cook, and these extreme right wing, religious right, Tea Party,
and these people I have
all these things.
Personally, I would have no time for, but they are political representatives. We have to engage them,
right? But the idea is that they have families too. They're actually human beings. Like, can we sit down and have a more reasonable discussion with at least some of these people, if not all of them, or at least the ones who are actually willing to sit down and discuss with us and treat us like people too, because it's become so rare anymore. I think I would love to talk to Sheila, but I think Donna Cook. I think that's a lost
No, I
cause.
don't think
Donna Cook.
ever
If
happened.
people who are listening are not from here, she is a county commissioner here in our county, and she has said some of the most preposterous things
Yeah.
I've
believe
ever
she-
seen an
she
elected
used the term
representative.
libtard a lot, didn't she?
Yeah. Well, I wrote an op-ed. This is over a year ago now. I
Yeah,
think.
it's been a while.
Basically, she was quoting someone else calling basically some of her constituents are liberals in her district, and referring to liberals or left. Well, first she posted a meme saying that progressivism is the same thing as socialism and communism and anti-American, and I can't remember what the hell all else, but it was the most absurd, laughable thing.
I thought it was liberalism as a disease.
There's that too. That's that Michael Savage thing, but it wasn't even that. But basically, no, progressivism is the same thing as communism, is the same thing as being anti-American or something like that.
Mhm.
You know, and referring to liberals as libtards and snowflakes and libtard flakes or something.
Yeah, it was.
Oh,
it
so
was,
we're
it was
talking about
highly,
other stuff here tonight.
Yeah,
But
whatever.
but all of this mess came out, and I wrote an op-ed basically bashing her as someone who's a representative of, supposed to be a representative of her constituents in the county, and to say things that are that embarrassing and stupid, and that nobody seems to bat an eye about it, and I found that problematic. Anyway, I don't think I'd ever have a nice conversation with Donna Cook. Maybe she would, but I don't know. Got my doubts. But let's get back on track here.
Yeah, I think so. We discussed enough party politics.
We
on
were
the
talking.
local level.
We went from the
So-
memo to Trey Gowdy to local politics.
So I guess.
Yeah, but David, we're friends
Yes.
now.
Yes,
We're friends now.
Yeah, but you're also very reasonable.
but you know why? Because we sat down and we had a drink
Yeah.
together, didn't we? We fermented
Yeah,
we
buried the
and now we're
gauntlet,
friends. Yeah,
you know?
we very much buried the hatchet. Unfortunately, that wasn't in my head. Which is a running gag, right? It was a running gag with us
Yes.
for a long time before we actually ever met
Burying
in
the
person.
hatchet needs
Yeah.
to be
Yeah.
David's forehead.
Yes, not in my forehead. But yeah, I mean that's what it took is really the ability to apprehend the fact that reasonable minds can disagree.
Mhm.
And a lot when you strip away all the punditry and the politicking that most of us just kind of want the same stuff and we can't exactly agree on how to get there. We mostly have the same values. 90%, I would say, of all people want pretty much the same shit, right?
Yeah, we do. And I don't know if we should use that as a segue to get into the rocket portion of our.
Yes, I think that's awesome. I think that's
Okay,
right.
okay. So-
Amanda, you take point.
Oh,
You're
before-
excited. I want her to do
before-
it.
Before we do it, I want to put it in a certain framework of, most of us know about the SpaceX launch. Elon Musk's company, founder of Tesla, also has SpaceX. He's had this research project going on forever, and he's accomplishing some really cool things. It kind of gives us this question of, back 30, 40, 50 years ago, that was NASA's job. And the federal government paid for it, and NASA developed these cool technologies.
So why is Elon doing it?
And
on
now
his own
Elon's doing it now at a private industry, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a private business. He is leaps and bounds.
With government
beyond NASA
contracts,
at this
too.
point. Yeah. Oh, this is a government contract.
Yeah, he has. Yeah, SpaceX has quite a bit in government funding.
Okay, so the question there is, does the government own the technology?
No,
No.
He gets to keep it, but the government pays for it.
essentially. So he
So
has
if he wanted,
one
if
of
he wanted
the
to sell
contracts
that,
is that he brings supplies, like SpaceX brings. He brings, so he doesn't bring it himself. But SpaceX, one of the contracts is that they supply the International Space Station.
okay. The question is, if he wanted to sell the technology to Russia, say, can he do it?
I don't know. You know what? That's an interesting point. Do you know much about how SpaceX got started?
I don't. And hang on, I'm gonna let you into it. But what I was going to ask was the whole way I want to frame this is the idea of private enterprise versus public funding and public industries like NASA. What are the benefits, detriments of doing that? Like say if Elon Musk is doing this himself and he has proprietary rights to what he develops, he could turn around and sell this technology to another country, and the U.S. has no claim to it.
Right.
Right.
And so is it beneficial to allow private enterprise in the United States to develop this technology that can then be sold to the highest bidder in another country? or should we be spending the money solely through NASA and public funding so that we own the technology? Yeah, so it's proprietary, and the United States owns the technology.
What about terms of any contract, though? Would there be any kind of stipulation?
That's what I'm not sure. I don't know that.
Amanda, give us some history and tell us what's going on, and we can kind of speculate from there.
Oh, so he actually, before he started doing this whole rocket ship thing, like he tried to buy an intercontinental ballistic missile from Russia.
Hot.
And they were going to sell it to him for something like, I think it was like $5 million or $8 million or something like that. And he was like, that's too much money. I can develop it myself. So, no, I'm totally serious.
He tried to buy a nuclear warhead payload missile without a nuclear warhead.
Well, he was trying to figure out, like, that was before he, really got it in his head that, you know what, like, we could do so much more if we just developed it ourselves. But he went to a meeting with like the Russian government and would try to buy a freaking missile from them. And they basically laughed him out of the room and he got pissed off and left.
And
developed it himself.
Advanced rocket on the planet.
So anyway, here's another fun fact too, because I know that, you're a conservative, and one of the biggest gripes I hear is, government waste. So on average, it takes about $1 billion to launch a rocket into space. $1 billion. That's so much money. They're estimating
if NASA's doing it.
If NASA's doing it. So they're estimating that the launch yesterday was about $90 million. It's like, what is that, 9% of what NASA would have spent?
I know. And see, that's like that huge thing the conservatives cry about is private industry can accomplish this so much cheaper, better, and at no cost to taxpayers. Now,
because he was able to reuse his boosters. That's why he was able to do it. So granted, I'm sure it's going to end up being more than that because they lost the core out into the ocean and damaged their drone ship and whatever else.
I don't know about this. Kind of give us a rundown on the factual end of that, because I am completely ignorant of it. It launched yesterday while I was at work. I haven't had time to watch it. I don't know what the hell happened. Kind of give me a rundown on the factual.
It was the coolest thing I've ever seen.
I heard the boosters that we used to just throw away. We used to just throw away boosters.
We did. It was like, you just use them once and they get lost in the ocean, and that's it.
And I heard they turned around and landed themselves.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, that's pretty fucking cool. I mean,
synchronized. It was a beautiful ballet of rockets.
That is really cool. But he lost some technology, though. He lost a core. What did you say?
Yeah, it was like
there was 2 booster rockets, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the side boosters.
There's the SpaceX, and then there was like the heavy. There was the heavy version. There's one rocket, and there's one rocket with like these 2 big boosters. That's what went.
Yeah, the side rockets on the space.
And so I think what a lot of people didn't understand initially is they thought that the booster rockets were going to come off at the same time, and then go back and land in their own places. They went off actually sequentially. Like they all went off. The first one disengaged. That's the one we saw that landed itself back on a launch pad. And the second one was supposed to carry it further into orbit, and then disengage itself and then land on that pad in the ocean. And I wasn't around to see because I had to go.
Yeah, the core booster like disengaged later on. And that was the one that was supposed to land on the drone ship. It's like an unmanned ship out in the ocean with a landing pad.
So does it look like the space shuttle setup of that big orange rocket being the core one and the 2 on the sides, the white ones? You ever seen a space shuttle before taking off?
Yes. Yeah.
So is that what we're talking about? Is the 2 side ones?
Yeah,
the
2
secondary
side
boosters. Those are the ones that came back to the pad.
Yes.
And
they landed right next to each other.
And the core one fucked up and took out the ocean pad.
Right.
Okay, so there was loss, and there was going to be significant financial loss there. But still, we landed the side ones, which is pretty damn cool. I mean, I'll give you that. I mean, and you have to spend money to make money. Occasionally, you fuck up. Right?
And that's a good point to tie back to the whole government. It costs $1 billion to launch the show. There's a thing about the government funding of research and projects and things like that. They're not always going to be, they're not always going to be your shooting stars, right?
Not.
Some of them are not going to pan out.
The gripe, David, is not It's not that you spend money to make money and you lose some shit in the process. The gripe is that the federal government is a massive waste of spending money. No matter how they do it, every time they touch dollar bills, they get a 2% return out of whatever they touch. Instead of,
but that argument is used, and that's the point I'm trying to make. That argument is used to cover when legitimate expenditures are being made on things that maybe don't work out, and that's characterized
and sure
as government waste in excess.
Yeah, but
it's not. And a lot of good research is done, and good medical research and good science research is done that gets thrown under the bus as government waste because it doesn't, turn into something profitable.
Sure, I just challenge you to show me private enterprise research that may be government funded, because that's great. Government can give money to private enterprise, and
sure,
they conduct, when they get to conduct it themselves, the returns on the investment are much higher.
And do you know why?
Because they can resell that technology from other uses.
Because
so they're gonna end up with a defense
They
contract.
will fund research. A company will fund research that they are going, or at least believe, will personally benefit from.
No,
more often than not. If it's a drug company, if you're doing research, that's going to show that your drug is safe.
Yeah, of course.
Guess what? They're going to benefit from that financially.
Of course.
If you're trying to run an experiment that might say, well, your drug is actually has some long-term health consequences that people should be afraid of, guess what? You might not get any funding.
Okay. When NASA was
there's a car that's about to start orbiting Mars.
Sweet. And that's awesome. And I did see some footage of that. But what I was asking was, back in the late 50s, early 60s, and even into the later 60s, when we were launching rockets at the moon and everything else, and we were developing space technology, NASA made a shitload of return on investment because they were cranking off technologies.
Sure.
That
you can do all
that plateaued
that
plateaued in the 80s. NASA doesn't really make much money off of research anymore. And that's kind of what I'm saying, is that it's really my question there is that SpaceX has done something better than NASA or anybody else has done in years and years and years, and has created amazing technology for a fraction of the cost that NASA does. And NASA's not getting any return from their investment.
Sure, but
so what
you can't disregard either is that
I want to talk about it in terms of space development, not just general government funding.
You have to understand too that they are using some of the technology that NASA developed too. Like they're just taking that technology and advancing it further.
Sure,
right.
Definitely,
and that can't be disregarded either.
Of course, I mean, we wouldn't even have any of this concept of anything if NASA had.
To my point, not all government research, not all government, R&D is going to be profitable or beneficial, in any kind of immediate sense.
No.
But if we're increasing scientific knowledge, the benefits are only great. A private company went and they used the research, the information, the knowledge gained from this kind of development, that was, some might say excessive, and really expensive, and they found a much more efficient way to do it. Would we care about finding a much more efficient way to do it if we didn't first have to learn the hard way that it's super damn expensive to do it the way NASA was doing it?
Wait, how do we know that it was so much more expensive and they did it so much more efficiently? Are we just throwing that out there?
Sorry, Haley,
we were citing some numbers from earlier.
We were citing numbers earlier. It costs about $1 billion to launch something into space, and SpaceX did it for $90 million. So for 9% of the return, SpaceX has developed a rocket that is better than anything else on the planet.
Based on reusability. And we didn't learn how important it was to invest in reusability until we figured out how damn expensive it was in the first place.
And that's where the private enterprise and the profit incentive comes into play. Like you have to incentivize saving money.
Yeah.
There's no incentive for government
to not waste money. The federal government doesn't really incentivize that. Instead, the budgets are controlled by Congress, by a bunch of idiots who just say, okay, I want to spend money here because people in my constituency hold jobs with Raytheon, and fuck it, give them $1 trillion. And let's see if we can build the F-35. Spoiler alert, it didn't work.
Wow.
But I am curious about your point about selling the proprietary information to a foreign government, because that is a really good point that I hadn't considered.
I would hope that they, if it was our tax dollars help fund this thing, that they had some kind of like I don't want to say non-compete,
like exclusivity agreement or something.
Version of that. Yeah, where you can't.
I would almost guarantee that has to be in there. So my concern.
They've got any damn sense at all.
And this was something I think Haley and you talked about before a couple of days ago or a day or so ago about, private versus public, funding is that if it's publicly funded and using taxpayer dollars, the United States owns the technology. We don't have to worry about somebody else selling it to somebody else. Like if Elon Musk decides, fuck it, I want to sell it to China, I can. If a good portion of SpaceX was paid for by U.S. taxpayer dollars and investment by the federal government, I would almost guarantee there's some proprietary,
clause.
No, it's a different thing. You're dealing with IP. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking. And Haley, I'd love to hear your input on that, because that's what I'm wondering is, from what I've seen and heard, is that a majority of this was SpaceX.
I think Melissa's bowing out. Melissa, are you going?
Yeah,
Okay,
I'm
Melissa,
hurting, and I'm not even able to keep up.
Okay. Well, I hope you feel better, Melissa.
Thank you. Appreciate
you
it.
for coming on.
Good night, guys.
Good night.
Good
Feel
night.
better.
Sorry,
Thank you.
Haley, what we were talking about earlier was that that SpaceX is funded, apparently a large portion of it's funded by U.S. taxpayer dollars. I don't know what the IP rights are there, and I'd love to hear your input on that, because I don't know.
Well, I mean, if you're saying funded by taxpayer dollars, you mean they get tax incentives by doing this kind of business here?
No, apparently we actually gave them money as like part of DARPA or part of NASA or something else. Like we actually funded SpaceX to do this.
Okay.
So what I'm saying is, when we gave them that money, did we not have some kind of contractual clause vis-a-vis with the funding? Like, oh, hey, by the way, whatever technology you're developing, we have a proprietary right to it for this amount of time as a federal government? Or
I mean, for one thing, Elon had released the patents to Tesla, like what, in 2011 or something.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't. He believes in a free exchange of technology and everything, and so I highly doubt that he would be interested in any kind of exclusivity clause whenever it comes to the development of technology. The difference.
So what you're saying is you don't know. You're guessing like we are, basically, right?
I mean, do you know? All I know is that Elon gave away all of his patents like 5 years ago and hasn't applied for another one since. So I have a feeling
he accepted a bunch of government cash to make this happen. Is what I'm saying. And usually government cash comes with strings.
I doubt that he would have agreed to that string. It's kind of against everything he's about.
I don't know, and that's something I want to research. I just didn't know if you knew or not.
I want one of his flamethrowers.
Yeah.
They sold that. I was like, oh my God, I want a flamethrower.
The issue is whenever everyone's in reverse engineer.
You ordered a flamethrower?
Yeah, fuck yeah, I did.
We're gonna make a special video of us.
Yeah, when we get it in like 6 years. I mean,
whatever.
It was essentially like a GoFundMe project. It was like, hey, when we release
they were real. Did you see he had the thing?
Oh yeah, no, they're dope.
The video of it, yeah.
That's $500. I was like, hey, you know that diva gift I buy myself once a year? It's the fucking flamethrower.
I'm gonna flamethrower.
It's cool.
Second
Amendment.
Who would mess with the person with the flamethrower? I don't even understand.
Yeah, right.
Like, hey, he's got a flamethrower. He's crazy.
Yeah, apparently, it's not enough to have the threat of a concealed pistol on you. You just gotta walk around with a fucking flamethrower.
Open carrying a flamethrower.
Yeah, right. I'm just gonna.
Isn't he shipping them out with like a fire extinguisher too? Isn't it like a complimentary fire extinguisher?
Fire extinguisher, actually.
What's that?
Yeah.
You had to pay more for the fire extinguisher.
Oh, I thought it came with it.
No.
You know he's not a libertarian because he would have shipped it out with a lecture about personal responsibility. A fire extinguisher.
I mean, but I do want to kind of bring, now that Haley's joined us, I kind of want to go back.
Oh, I had to get it in. Sorry.
Damn it, David.
Yeah, keep laughing at yourself, bro. Anyway, no, I really want to hear what Haley has to say about this, though, specifically. You know, we were talking about it beforehand, and Amanda brought up that SpaceX initially, when they started this, tried to buy nuclear ICBM from Russia without the nuclear warhead, mind you, but the ICBM. He wanted the technology,
the actual rocket,
and they wanted way too much money, and he was like, "Fuck it, I'll develop myself," and quit in the middle of the discussion with the Russian government.
I mean, you've heard of the phrase reverse engineering, right?
Yeah, I'm aware how that works, but I'm just wondering. how does it apply as far as United States interests go? You know, like the big picture here is that.
Well, I mean,
Apparently,
at the end of the day, you have to think about what you know, your intellectual property, what kind of protection that you can get for it, and patents are a very protected class of technology, but they expire after 17 years. So in 17 years, you hold your patent, and then 17 years later, you have to be like, and here's how I made this. In that time frame, people can try to figure out how you made this particular piece of equipment and reverse engineer, and thereby take away your patent power. But you know, they can't, you know, but they have to actually be able to show that they figured it out by reverse engineering and not by some kind of covert-esque tactics. There is,
they
but
didn't steal your product and then literally rip it off.
You know, but whenever it comes to technology, the more privatized that our technology is being held, the more that we have to realize that us as a country, you know, that's believing in capitalism at its finest. You know, they're going to have the trade secret. Do we actually have the industry and the ability to reverse engineer and figure out how they did that? No. Okay, well, let's hope that, you know, if we really want to be the best at something and the most competitive, we're just going to have to keep on funneling out really big bucks to keep this particular company really interested in staying here and sharing this technology with us. But we don't have, you know, like, there's no, they can leave. It's not government owned IP. It's privatized. It's a privately owned IP.
Yes.
You know?
And that's what I was wondering is, do we have kind of I'd like to know the details on that. And I kind of want to look it up and to try to understand if that's published somewhere we know. But does,
I mean,
SpaceX
you know,
have a
getting
contract to share
funding
with
to
us?
want innovation, to create jobs, to do these kinds of things, that's something like America does all the time, you know, in various industries. This isn't like anything new.
No, I know.
But you know,
I'm wondering, do we have like a trade secret sharing agreement? Something along the lines of, hey, do we have first priority or first access to this technology?
well, I mean, if it's a trade secret and we're familiar with that technology as America, as a country, the thing is, we have no power to stop someone else who has the exact same right in this trade secret from telling it to other people.
Of course, because if we developed it ourselves as classified,
then that would be our trade secret. We could then put in non-disclosure clauses. It's America's. But whenever it's privatized, and the company in particular in this example is Elon Musk, who has said he flat out said fuck patents like at least 5 years ago. It was a big deal.
I want to ask what the difference is between this and, say, government contracts with Lockheed or Raytheon.
I don't know what that is.
Lockheed and Raytheon are the two biggest developers of missiles, airplanes, jets, fighter jets, all of our super proprietary technology that we do. DARPA funds. They're private industries. We fund them. And
but we have the difference. We don't hold military,
but we don't hold the patents. We have non-disclosure agreements in agreement with it.
Sure.
It's military, yes. But what's the difference between NASA and military? I mean, where does the funding come from? It's coming from the federal government, no matter what. It's coming out of the Treasury, right?
I mean, one is going inherently into R&D, and the other one is going into, you know, defense. So I mean, those are two different kinds of contracts.
No,
R&D versus.
And that's what I'm wondering is, what is the difference, and do they carry the same stuff? Or
I mean, it's a different purpose of contract. It's you know.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering is, what are the terms? I mean, they're contracts. You can change the terms, whatever.
I mean, you know, we can keep on asking like, oh, I wonder about the contract, but if none of us know, why would we keep on?
Well, I don't want to make an assumption one way or the other, because it sounds like you're assuming that Elon Musk is free to do whatever the fuck he wants with the technology. And
I am assuming that Elon would not agree to any kind of, sort of restriction on his ability to share technology, because that goes fundamentally against his business MO.
Yeah, and I think that's
I think that's a really fair point.
Yeah, I think it's very reasonable.
Yeah, we would. I mean, initially think that there would be some kind of non. Well, I mean, we're all kind of flinging conjecture at the wall, but
yeah,
it's. I think there. I do kind of lean towards Haley's position here, though, because it doesn't sound like he would agree to any kind of contract that would have that kind of stipulation into it.
Well,
but we don't know.
Also,
we should look it up instead of hemming and hawing.
Yeah, I was going to say, and I think that's a fair assumption in general. Because if we're talking $90 million, that's not Raytheon/Lockheed money. Raytheon Lockheed money is a fuck ton more than that. And
right.
If they're going to get that money, they're
also building weapons versus something that's going to be used for space exploration.
that's fair.
So anyway, all that to say, I think Elon Musk is a really cool guy. I love what he's doing. The launch was inspiring. I was talking about this a little bit before we went live. It's we get into all this divisive politics and being angry at each other and watching, our institutions in America crumble and things like that. Like, it was a really cool moment watching this launch of saying, look what we can do when we have our shit together, right? Or
and by we, you mean people?
Yes, I mean people. when us people are
because it's not American.
And I'd like to know, well, that brings the next question up.
Right, not specifically American. I just mean people, us as a fucking species.
Well, sure.
Like,
I mean, we're getting real Star Trek with it. But
we're good at rising, turning our eyes.
Back up. I'd like the Star Trek idea. Back it up just a notch. I'm just wondering how much money.
Right?
How much?
Is that what you're gonna say?
Oh my god! How much money was actually invested in SpaceX from the federal government? Could they have accomplished this without the federal government's money? If they could have, who the fuck cares about the federal government or whatever the hell they're paying for? Because honestly, they can't keep pace with what's actually being developed by private citizens.
They have a lot of things going on. I mean, they were trying to make that affordable Tesla model, and so they issued bonds last year. I almost bought one, man, because I want one.
Actually, fun fact,
I might.
People from high school. There's a good friend of mine works for Tesla now as an engineer, and was given one of the Tesla S's.
Really?
Yeah, and it's bright blue, and I was like, "Oh, you."
Well, they were gonna make the affordable, less than $45,000 Tesla, but in order to do that, they needed funding, and so they issued a bunch of bonds. And if you're interested, you could have bought a bond. And they still haven't hit that. That was like 2 years ago. So I guess we're still waiting for that affordable Tesla.
Super fun fact. My friend I was just talking about went to Tesla. Before that, he worked for Bath Iron Works and developed the brand new the destroyer that just got launched, the Zumwalt or whatever. He worked for the federal government and uses aerospace engineering, whatever, to build the newest warship. And then when that project was complete, he went to Tesla.
Huh.
Now he lives outside of San Francisco or something, and he's balling.
I bet.
With his metallic bright blue Tesla Roadster. And I was like, wait, dude, you're married. Just wait until you have a kid. Just wait.
He worked 2 years.
And get the floor.
Anyway, yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think it was an inspiring moment for pretty much anybody who watched it. I would hope it was, if you're not so jaded and miserable as a human being that you can't look at that kind of technological wonder and not feel just at least a little bit inspired, because I sure as hell was when we watched the booster rocket remote land itself back on the pad. Like that moment was really cool. Like we can do awesome shit, right? We can do really cool stuff.
Spoiler alert, I learned about that in the free hangout before we started recording. I did not know that happened. I was working when this thing happened. I didn't know really the implications of it. Everyone was freaking out about this rocket launch. And I'm like, no, all I saw was it can carry twice the payload of any rocket ever, and it was successful. And I'm like, oh, that's super cool. We developed this ability to carry 64 metric tons into space. Awesome. I had no idea the booster rockets landed back on the damn pad simultaneously. Like, what? What? Okay,
Yeah,
that's pretty cool.
I watched it with my daughter.
Mind was like, okay, cool. I'm into it.
My daughter had to leave school early yesterday. She had strep throat, but we were sitting in the living room watching it, and both of us just like jumped up and started screaming because it was just the coolest thing.
Okay, that's legit some Star Trek shit, and I'm okay with writing checks to that. Yeah, take my taxpayer dollars.
There you go.
Write checks to that. That's a cool development. I'm into it.
I'm just saying it was an inspiring moment.
If you get a chance, like there are videos out there of the of boosters landing on the drone ship. Successfully. Yesterday's wasn't successful.
And I will definitely be doing that as soon as I
it's not perfect.
Get back home. Yes, I will be watching.
But you know what's awesome? Nobody died when that happened.
Yeah, it's great. No, that's cool. I love it. No, I mean, it sounds awesome. Also, I've always been an Elon Musk fan since the Tesla Roadster.
Yeah,
I always like this guy's cool.
It's a cool, whimsical dude. Like
this guy's doing it for me.
We like a little whimsy.
Crazy as hell, but oh my gosh.
Yeah, he is crazy.
It reminds me of if you guys ever watch Silicon Valley? He reminds me of any of the major players in Silicon Valley, like the guy who runs Hulu.
That's such an insult to Elon.
No, it just reminds me of like this psychopathic, like just crazy, egotistical, like whatever. I don't know. I don't know the guy. I don't know anything about him. But that's what I get from him. It's like he's extremely intelligent and just making shit happen.
And just as crazy.
I just do what I want. I do what I want. I don't care. No, Russia, I will not buy an ICBM from you. I'll just fucking make it myself. I don't care.
Yeah.
But it's funny that this is, and we have to segue here in a second. But it's funny this is juxtaposed to we had seen recently on the Facebook page articles about him doing that solar project in Australia, the solar power for like I can't remember how many thousands of households, kind of thing of building like these receptors and things like that. Where like these people who are going to be recipients of this via a government, grant. Essentially going to have like no electric bill, because they have these installations in their homes. And what an awesome product this is. And, think about all the possible applications for it. And the fact that it's not happening here because, we have, we're engaged in a tariff war over solar panel technology and other dumb bullshit that Trump's doing. Like, and the fact that it filled me with a sense that he's going to drive innovation away because we want clean coal. That's what we really need, right? So,
and in all fairness, I would.
Oh, hi, Brandon. You're still there.
Yeah, Brandon's still here. I feel really bad with not letting him talk.
I'm gonna.
No, that's absolutely fine. It's a free country. You're allowed to keep me quiet if you want. I'm quite annoying, trust me.
No, speak up. I just get super excited.
No, I'm just a listener. I prefer to just kind of soak in the fermentation of others instead of bring it out into the world.
You're gonna have to speak. I'm probably gonna head out of here soon because I've got to deal with some, personal shit.
Oh, you got something going on.
But
good luck with that,
what I was gonna say was, in all fairness, from the conservative standpoint, you hear me do this free market shit all the time. Trump and what the GOP is doing to bar technologies into green technologies is just as bad as anything else. This is stupid.
Well, it's not. It's like there's a tariff on solar panels, but it's a different kind of attitude, and I don't understand why it's not more obvious that there is a market for that this kind of energy. That people are interested in it. That more than half of Americans, think climate change is real. And even if they don't, they'd be interested in living off the grid and, have it truly being on their own house on a hill and running their own, own thing.
I'm not going to lie to you. If I build a house, I'm going to build a
We
very
got it.
small
house. So there's
Powerwall,
money.
Tesla shit.
Yes, we get it. But
I'm in.
Yes.
Sign me up.
Yes. But
I'm saying
oh my God, stop. What I don't understand is why people aren't realizing how much money is in this industry, how much potential and money. It's marketable, it'll sell, and it'll enable people to become more independent, less reliant on certain infrastructures. I mean, I don't get why we're hearing phrases like clean coal,
Crony capitalism.
I mean, I'm trying to be an optimist, but like at the end of the day, if you're a capitalist about money and independence, I just think you need to revisit your stance on this kind of industry and technology, because it's right up your fucking alley.
So that's what I was just saying, was that I think that it is the same exact regulatory wall that everyone complains about from the conservative aspect. You are now barring burgeoning technology. There's a demand for
Well,
it.
what technology is being barred? There's a tariff on solar panels that aren't made here.
Yes, and you know what the purpose of that tariff is, right?
To buy American.
To stymie the influx of solar technology to replace fossil fuels. I mean, that's exactly what the purpose is. I mean, come on, it's shallow.
Yeah,
it's obviously
with him
there.
on this one, actually.
Yeah, no, that's the entire purpose.
It comes down to campaign promises and rhetoric.
It's stupid.
Protecting the coal miners and
if you want
whole clean coal, and
if you're implementing
the fossil fuel industry and all that bullshit,
if you're implementing tariffs on things that are manufactured outside the United States, perhaps do so in a manner that is across the board and doesn't target, I don't know, technologies that are in demand, that are green technologies, are easier to produce in Asian countries and whatnot, because we can use slave labor over there. And I can get my solar panels a lot cheaper when 5-year-olds make them, or whatever the situation may be, or adults that are paid 35 cents a day. I still want my solar panel. I'd like to get it cheap. Can I get the 35 cent a day slave labor? Like, that's what I want. But now you're going to tariff it, and you're going to be like, oh, well, we're doing this to support American industries. Well, yeah, I don't want to pay somebody $15 an hour to create something that can be made for 35 cents an hour in China.
Well, we don't have that much of a solar panel industry here. They also did it on washing machines, which we do have a competitive one, and we're trying to stop South Korea from taking over.
God damn it, Samsung.
I'm sorry, I don't know about my LG. I freaking love it.
There's a plant in Clarksville, Tennessee. That's basically under threat because of this new.
They just have to. They got to hurry up. Is what they have to do. But we actually don't have like a manufacturing solar panel. I'm not saying for or against it, but we actually don't have that industry here. What is bad though is that we have an industry of installing solar panels and everything.
Yeah, because that's labor that Americans have to do. What are you going to bring?
And those are still jobs within the
Chinese
industry.
over?
That's jobs within the industry, but we don't have a solar panel manufacturing. We don't really have a serious one here.
And that's exactly my point, is that the tariff is not stopping competition to help Americans. It's to stymie the influx of green technology. And that's
we have the technology, I think.
Yeah, but no one wants to pay the money to establish that here because we can get them for
they're artificially deflating demand is what they're doing.
Exactly what they're doing. That's exactly
China's
what it is.
notorious for this,
bullshit. No, it's not China's fault. This is the Trump administration, the bullshit of we're going to put tariffs on
I'm
it
talking
to bring it in.
about like the ultra cheap labor. And
I know. Well, that's what they do.
Shit.
That's why we buy things from China.
Gift.
We don't buy things from China for their quality. China doesn't make quality products. We buy them from China because they're adequate and they're cheap. That's the whole point of bringing in Chinese shit, right?
And part of the cheap aspect is the price dumping. Is that
because they don't pull this. We have a nice.
They pull different bullshit. It doesn't mean we should be okay.
We should, because where are you buying them in America where they're manufactured? Because they're not. Because no one wants to manufacture in America.
They're tampering with the markets, though.
When the cost of production is 1,000% more of what it would be in China.
Do you mind if I quickly pop in?
Yes, absolutely.
All right, so I'm going to give a little bit of context because it's kind of almost a story of sorts. So I actually did a senior high school project with a guy who installed solar panels.
Really?
And essentially, this is, as far as government like kind of kicking people out of the market, this isn't new at all. In fact, TVA was kicking people out of the market locally so that they had control over installation of solar panels.
What's DBA?
Tennessee
TVA,
Valley Authority.
Tennessee Valley Association, which is a kind of pseudo government industry, sort of.
It is. Essentially,
I got you.
Yeah, there's an alphabet agency under FDR that basically brought electricity to America.
I got it. Go on, Brandon.
Yeah. I believe it's a quasi-government agency, but I'm not 100% sure. But essentially, so this isn't new as far as barring people out of the market. The government has kind of had quite a bit of interest in doing this on local levels and national levels before. I mean, and as far as the development of alternative energy is concerned, I mean, I'm not going to be too much of a pessimist, but I am going to say that China has essentially kicked us out of the market. We really can't beat them in the fight anymore.
Manufacture solar cells and solar panels. I mean,
if we had a chance, it was probably in the early 2000s.
Yeah. Oh, we had a chance, guys. We had a chance whenever, this is going to sound horrible because I hate that I'm saying this. We had a chance when Jimmy Carter was president. Right whenever the solar
and Al Gore also did.
Well, right whenever solar panel technology was first budding was in the late 70s, but it just like happened to be the time that like our total infrastructure went to shit, and we were having those rolling blackouts in New York, and the Hollywood sign was all dilapidated and everything. And Jimmy Carter was president, and he installed these American-made solar panels on top of the White House. And as soon as Reagan got elected, you know, whenever I learned this, it was just sort of like, and that was whenever we decided to not do this part of technology, his very first act as president was to rip the solar panels off the roof of the White House.
I remember that.
and then
no, seriously, I remember that.
No. Yeah, I'm sorry.
I mean, I wasn't there, but
I didn't mean to interrupt. You guys continue onward. I'm just gonna say my goodbyes. It was a wonderful time with y'all, but I've got to get out of here.
You didn't even get to the Immortal Army.
All right,
let's go. Okay, we all know my opinions on rolling 70-ton tanks down public roads that can't handle it. Can we not, please, for the love of fucking God? All right, I'm just going to say that.
Okay.
Yeah, anyway, I got to go. It was
James, always a pleasure, sir.
Yep. Y'all have a wonderful evening.
You too.
We shall catch you next time. It's all good. You don't have to be that quiet. We know you're walking out. It's all good, man. You take care.
Now, real quickly.
Brandon, you were saying something.
Oh, my apologies. So, real quickly, overall, regarding the Nunes memo, which I didn't really get too much of a chance to kind of talk on that, mostly because I was still trying to form my opinion on the whole thing. So, the way I look at it is, well, for one, I'm just going to come out and say it with no holds barred. Yeah, that memo is full of shit. Much like any other politically motivated memo. And the irony is they throw charges saying, oh, the Steele memo or whatever is politically motivated. It's pretty much what they're doing. But as far as the Russian investigation as a whole, I might as well make my opinion known to some extent, without getting into too much detail, unless you want to go there. Which is that overall, though there's a decent amount of evidence to suggest that there is collusion, we are essentially looking at potentially impeaching a president. That requires a high burden of proof. And so I'm kind of waiting for that smoking gun, whatever it is. May it be a phone conversation recorded from NSA servers or et cetera, et cetera. Because we all know they have it. Come on. They've already got it, and they know exactly where it is. They're choosing not to use it. That's my opinion on it. But
I got you. Yeah, I mean, I think with regards to the whole collusion investigation. I mean, it's bad enough that I think the Don Jr. stuff and meeting with the Russian lawyer. I think to me that's always been the smoking gun. Hey, do you want to collude? Yeah, sure, let's do that. Like intention to collude, I mean, is good enough. Whether or not they got anything useful out of it is actually immaterial to the intent to collude. But I guess all that said, I think if Trump, honestly, my opinion has been for a while to, I guess, just reopen that just briefly, is that while it seems that people around him were colluding and were talking with and working with the Russians, Papadopoulos bragging about it, which really, launched the whole investigation to begin with. Like, that's all kind of there. Whether or not that Trump can personally get nailed for that, I don't know. That seems like a gray area to me. I think it's more likely that they'll get him on obstruction of justice, but from his intent, desire to see this thing go away, and essentially, like the firing of Comey kind of thing, and the the demand and the loyalty tests and things like that. I think he's a lot more likely to get nailed. The fact that he did already order Mueller's firing to I guess one of his the White House lawyers or what I'm going to say, like McCabe or something, but I think that's the wrong name.
Go
ahead.
I actually think one of the biggest things is I think that we can say pretty confidently that Flynn has flipped.
Oh yeah.
And Sally Yates told Trump, hey, this guy has said one thing to your vice president, and we know that the Russians know that that's a lie, and your vice president is announcing it. You need to do something. 2 days later, I think, 36 hours, she's fired. And it wasn't, I'm not saying Flynn was a spy, but he was the head of national security, sitting in on the most sensitive of meetings where they were talking about Russian sanctions for colluding in the election in those first 21 days that he was around.
And they knew
2
he shouldn't have
days
been
in,
there.
he is warned 3 different times by her. She's fired, and then he sits on that information for 19 days. And he allows his head of national security to continue to be the head of national security, fully knowing that that guy has lied to his vice president. His vice president has lied to the people based off of that information, and he's open to blackmail. So that right there is, I think, something that we forget about with Sally Yates. We focus on Comey and on the FBI and everything, but what we forget about is, this whole thing is about what Trump knew, when he knew it, and what he did with that information. And I think sitting on being told your head of national security is super open to blackmail, and he's allowing your vice president to lie to the American people. You're sitting on that information for 19 days. That's one of the biggest things to me.
No, I think it's an amazing point.
Yeah.
So kind of a couple things I want to bring up. The first one was actually a point that a friend made to me that kind of blew my mind for just a couple seconds there, but then it kind of made sense after that. And essentially what she had told me is essentially overall the CEOs like him, when you bring a decision to their feet, they essentially would say, take care of it. I don't care how you do it, just take care of it. That sort of thing. So it's probably likely that that's the route that he went, at least initially. Whether he has like direct involvement and is playing a heavy hand, well, it looks somewhat likely now, but probably originally it was probably more along the lines of, oh, take care of it, that sort of thing. And then on top of that, he's kind of known as a crook among people in New Jersey and New York. He's not exactly known as some great innovator like he pretended to be during his campaign. So that's something to remember. And he may have had some involvement with the mafia. We really don't know 110%. So he's kind of a crook.
Yeah, I mean,
I have a calendar. Here, let me turn my video around. My fiance bought me a calendar that is the countdown to Trump.
Oh my God.
And so, like, you flip through it, and it just has all these great little nugget facts in there. But the upcoming one is the February 13th. Trump announces he is resigning from his position as chairman of Trump Entertainment Resorts, February 13th, 2009. 4 days later, Trump Entertainment Resorts files for bankruptcy. There's just some good nuggets in there. So, I mean, you don't have to convince me that he's not necessarily the most scrupulous businessman.
A lot of people forget what the word con man means. It means.
But whenever you say like CEO, take care of it, I do think that he is the type of person. I mean, he's stepped down from 4 different businesses to file bankruptcy a few days later. I think that this is an entirely different beast because he has switched from being a C-list celebrity while simultaneously being the most famous person in the world. And he has to sort of like come to grip with that. So this isn't the sort of situation where you see a business is failing and we got to file liquidation, bankruptcy, not even restructuring. So, I mean, he's seen other things. He's been on other ships that are going down. I think he's really going to fight this one going down.
I think so too. I don't think it's going to be a Nixon situation where he resigns.
Yeah.
I think he's going to fight it to the end.
Yeah, he's got too much of an ego and way too much pride. No, he's not going to.
I don't know. I think the only reason he wouldn't resign is to protect himself from criminals, because while he's in office, he can't be charged with anything criminally. He would have to be impeached first, and that won't happen unless we have a Democratic Congress. So I don't know. Like, it might be that he the rat finally gets cornered kind of thing, because I think he'll stay in office as long as he can, if for no other reason that he can't have criminal charges against him, and also his reputation and his pride and stuff like that. Those are all factors as well. But like, you can't do anything while he's in office. So he
I think he's going to try to pardon himself personally.
and call Russia a ruse.
Yeah. I mean,
I believe if it came down to it, he would say, well, it's all like in what he would say, I guess, on camera is even, the version of, it's all bullshit, but I'm going to pardon myself just because, we can't trust the corrupt system. So I'm going to pardon myself. That's legal? There's actually no legal prohibition from him pardoning himself, which would involve an admission of his crimes.
It's an unclear area of law.
Yeah.
Huh.
I think might want to fix that.
What's really scary? And we really, I mean, at some point, I do want to talk briefly about the military parade. But
you mean the North Korea parade?
Right, the North Korea parade. But before that, think about this just for a second. Consider, I was listening to a podcast of some other folks, and they were having a discussion about it. There is literally nothing, no bars, no checks. If Donald Trump wanted to launch a nuclear warhead right this second, there's nothing anybody could do about it. There's no there's no checks and balances. Like because there's things that we've never had to consider about having to worry about what our president's doing before. And that's the takeaway, is that we've never had to worry about. There's literally nothing stopping Donald Trump from launching a nuclear warhead.
Oh, poor David.
No. It's not just the nuke thing, but like with regards to pardoning himself or these other, the violations of what we assume that people are trying to uphold with regards to the institutions that underpin the way our government works.
But yeah, he's highlighted a lot of cracks in our institutions.
Exactly,
that we've had so much faith in for since our country was founded.
He's wormed his way into
like a psychological eval coming in.
The thing is, though,
stuff like that.
Something that I think that we all need to keep in mind is the way that we govern ourselves is an experiment in democracy. We are still in the experimental phases. We have learned things as we've gone along, but what we're trying to do is continue on in this experiment of democracy, of self-governance. And George Washington stepped down after 2 terms. And then eventually they're like, let's make sure that that's like a rule, that you got to do that as a president.
Yeah.
Whenever
came after FDR,
whenever
yeah,
Kennedy,
that was kind of a newish thing, in the grand scheme of things.
Whenever Kennedy was assassinated, some of our amendments were revamped to sort of deal with succession. Whenever the things that happened with Nixon and with Clinton, we have a better understanding of the impeachment process and we've refined it. And so, I get it. We have someone who is a less than scrupulous business person with a very checkered past running our office right now. But I do think that by showing us these cracks, I don't think that we necessarily need to be like, holy shit, there's all these cracks. I think that's just an opportunity.
Yeah, that is a good point too. But I think the thing that is worrisome to me, and maybe it's still because it's all, the dust hasn't settled, I guess, on the investigation yet. But it feels like, going into the 2018 elections, like, the alarm bell has been rung, that Russia is currently trying to interfere with these elections that are coming up.
Right.
And we have this administration that's resisting the idea that Russia even has influenced anything to start with. So it worries me that nothing is being done now, like when we have an election this year,
Well, I think that right now is a perfect example. What we're doing is all of us have different opinions on certain things and we're talking about it. And, maybe it's a good thing for someone like Trump to come around, because this whole thing about self-governance doesn't work with overwhelming apathy. And in recent years, I do feel as if people sort of get apathetic about, the government and voting for everything. But, now we're sort of realizing like, hey, we have to elect representatives. We have to call them and say what we want. Like, we have to actually participate in this experiment of democracy. So, sure, it feels as if the cards are stacked, but, I don't think you're feeling apathy. I think you're just feeling like, oh man, this is going to be a fight. So I think that is like a good thing. It's not that like, oh, well, you know what? Trump's in office, screw it, whatever. I'm going to move to Jamaica or something. I don't know. You're actually like, you're concerned about the government and you're hoping and you're going to do your part. So I think that's good.
Yeah, that's it's another one of those like sort of, a silver lining type, hopeful things about all of this is that it's gotten so many people, reinterested in, in civics and government and, how all of this works and to be engaged politically and to be informed, that, it's, it's like it's like Anakin bringing balance to the Force by killing all the younglings, and you have to go, oh shit, we have to fight the Empire now, like and you have to get your shit together and get up and fight because no one's gonna hand it to you.
I like that analogy though.
That's I've thought about it in those terms for a little while now. But speaking of the Empire,
great segue.
You like it? You see what I did there? Trump apparently, I guess, in some like Security Council meeting or something, talked about wanting to have, and of course, all the pundits and all the the news outlets went on and on about it. But essentially saying that he'd like to see a military parade in D.C. And I think a lot of people have pointed out
about that.
Yeah.
Like, can he order that?
He's commander in chief.
I
mean, if he's ordering his troops to have a parade, I mean, again, this is one of these things. Like, we never thought about this before. Can he do that? Like,
yeah.
There's no checks and balances. There's no, because there's sort of an assumption of civic duty and high-mindedness in anybody who holds that much power, even amongst the absolute bitter partisans. There was always at least some nod to these institutions.
I just wonder.
And he just ignores it completely. Like, I think he can. I think it's completely within his power to order a military.
I think he can too. I just we should have a podcast about the state of finances and the economy one day, relatively soon. Just because I was thinking today or yesterday was whenever there was the agreement on a partial funding of the government to extend the deadline to prevent a government shutdown, and the provision in it, which surprisingly passed through the Senate, where you need 60%, so you need Democrats to actually vote for it. They matter there in the Senate. It lifted the cap on military domestic spending for at least 2 years, and most likely it's just going to be a cap that's no longer in place on how much money the government can spend on national security purposes and on domestic military efforts. And so I do wonder if this parade falls into this domestic military category of no cap on spending, baby.
It's entirely possible. And this is a great point. Actually, I was talking to my girlfriend Janie before we came on, and she made the point of, and of course she's against it for probably a lot of reasons, but a point she brought up is, think about how much basically tax dollars that we would be spending on doing this. And if you are really a person who's pro-military, would you rather see this this big parade, this big flag waving thing, or would you rather see that money spent on actually taking care of our veterans and our wounded veterans? And people bag on the VA and it's bad and it's awful, but like our veterans still need looking after, right? And we love bringing up this comparison when we're talking about, are we going to let immigrants into the country? But why is it not being considered now? If they're going to have some big stupid parade that nobody needs for anything.
Well, I'll counter that.
Go for it.
I'm from Louisiana. I know a thing or two about parades.
Okay.
There is a lot of, and Louisiana is so corrupt, so there's no telling. But there is a lot of taxpayer
sure
money.
You want to invoke that then?
There is a lot of taxpayer money that's probably very heavily skimmed, that goes into the planning of these parades and everything. But it is a huge boom to the economy. So I do think that as a counter, there is spending this money to do this money could be used for something else. However, is it possible to think of the, possibility that by doing this event and this activity, it maybe raises awareness for charitable donations and sort of, is a sort of, injection into the vein of something, economically speaking. So there is something to keep in mind.
Economic effect.
So here's my thought, because I feel like I kind of had a little bit of a dissenting opinion on this, at least in the discussion in our group. I do kind of have mixed feelings on it, because first of all, it's not like we haven't done these sorts of things before. It's just been a long time since we have. I think I read that the last time we did one was when the troops came home from Desert Storm. Okay, so that was in the early 90s. So it wasn't that long ago, but it was still quite a bit of time ago. And again, we had one after World War II, after World War I. It's not like this is unprecedented. I think the part that's unprecedented, in my opinion, is that we aren't celebrating the end of a war. Like, so that part is kind of like, okay, that's kind of strange to me. But then again, at the same time, like the wars that we are fighting right now, like people are so disengaged from them. Like they don't pay attention to what's happening, like what's going on with our troops overseas, you know? So I am kind of like mixed, and I'm trying not to be as cynical with this as I guess some of the other things that I've seen come from this administration.
I have a very stupid question, and my Louisiana is going to show, but like, does everywhere else not throw Veterans Day parades every year? Like,
we do, but they're sponsored by local governments. It's not like a national thing, and I think that's the difference.
So I mean, it's on Veterans Day.
Some towns do, like,
and it's a national holiday. Like everywhere has a parade on Veterans Day, right?
Not everywhere.
Well, not everywhere, but yeah, a lot of places. I think there's a couple things to point out here that's worthwhile. That yes, we have had military parades before. Yes, most a lot of other countries have military parades as well. I think it's what people suspect or projecting about the tone and tenor of a Trump military parade that is not signifying either Veterans Day or the end of an armed conflict. And I think and obviously when they post articles about this on social media or in the paper, whatever, like they're going to include a picture of tanks, right? Like big ass tanks with the idea
that question I had.
Is it a military parade?
Is it a way to create propaganda?
Are they cars with military guys like waving and stuff like that, or is this like a Kim Jong-un style like show of military might? Is this us celebrating?
We don't know
soldiers?
yet. That's the
we don't know. And again,
so that's something that I'm asking.
Type things.
I haven't read any article about it. I know that it's happening. I haven't heard anything on any news. I mean, I haven't listened to any podcast and I just haven't clicked on any articles that talk about it. So, like, did he just order a parade and we're just talking about that, or like
he had a conversation about it behind closed doors. Like there's not.
I mean, I know he said it in the Oval Office, and whenever I found that out was right whenever I found out about the whole no longer capped to domestic military spending. But I mean, do we know that he's paraded around?
No.
Like, what do we know?
Very, very little. Very little.
I
think that's one of the things that makes it interesting is that everyone has sort of ran to their conclusions.
I think that a war hasn't ended, and I also think that it's a little disingenuous to say that we don't have parades to celebrate vets, because we do every year. And maybe Louisiana does it a whole lot better. I don't think that the point
is to say that those Veterans Day parades don't exist, but just to bring more attention to. We have troops coming home like now constantly, that need continuous support that aren't getting it. I mean, honest to God, they're not getting the support that they need from the VA, from, treating their PTSD, all of these other things. I don't see the harm in raising awareness to some of the, I guess, private funded or, private organizations or charitable organizations, I guess is what I'm trying to think of, that actually do more than sometimes even the government to support our veterans and not even just veterans, like our troops that are currently serving.
I mean, I think that, Veterans Day happens every year. Anyone who has served in the military and goes over, you're a vet. There is you can definitely amp up that celebration every year. And yeah, we could do a much better job of taking care of our vets. So I'm wondering, why a parade. I mean, I don't know if he's like going to parade out tanks or anything.
Yeah, I don't either.
But I also think that we as a society are very key to celebrate our vets. And we do it every year. We do put up yellow ribbons and we tie them around our trees. That like you can support your vets and not support a war. But I'm not seeing why having a parade right now I mean, I just don't get it. Like,
Well, that's
I
the
mean,
thing too.
it-
Like you're
like
speculating,
now,
or are they talking about having it now, or is he talking about planning for Veterans Day? Because
yeah,
Veterans
that
Day is 9
that
months
would be
away, and
great.
9 months is about the appropriate time that you would need to plan something like that.
And that would be great. Like let's have an awesome Veterans Day parade. I'm totally about planning a massive party that, like, yeah. But if it's just to, have an event just to do it, I think that is a little bit wasteful. And, whenever you have like something I read, it was something like 85% of vets who have diagnosed PTSD, and I have been diagnosed with PTSD not for serving in the military, but for other reasons. They have said that marijuana is something that really helps them. Whenever you have an administration that's really against that, I mean, I just don't know, like what is this parade supposed to accomplish?
It does. It feels disingenuous. I get it.
But I mean, if we don't know that he's going to be parading around tanks, that's fine. But I can criticize his decision to fund a parade versus funding, mental health treatment. Like, I mean,
yeah, and that was my girlfriend's point too. Again, with credit to her, is like what's really going to be better for them. But you're also talking about sort of the shot in the arm and raising awareness and being inspiring, and that's all possible. The fact is that he said on a January 18th meeting, that he wanted a military parade in D.C. and to begin planning for it. And that's all we know, So, there are people on the left and what, a lot of pundits and stuff are doing, are basically, touting this as, Trump wanting, to show off the glorious immortal army of God Emperor Trump. Like, and it's very much like, it's very much like sounding like that. Like this is Mao.
Well, I think we jumped to that assumption.
This is Stalin. That's what it sounds like because it's Trump, and that's
Yeah.
It was on January. It was on January 18th or 19th.
I think so. I think that's what I read.
When was the last?
Is it to celebrate his inauguration?
I mean, of this year. I mean, it's.
When did North
January
Korea and
meeting with top generals?
When did North Korea and South Korea come to that agreement to do the Olympics together? So North Koreans are they're gonna go under that same unified flag, and the North Koreans are in Pyongyang, and then he did a massive military parade for after that. Didn't that happen like 2 weeks ago, guys?
I'm not actually sure.
I'm looking it up right now because I don't know.
Yeah, but when did the North Korea South Korea talks about Pyongyang happen?
What was CNN it? Article was listed on January 18th.
Oh my God, it's January 18th. I knew it.
Oh shit.
Damn it, you guys. I'm trying not to be cynical, but here you are having me being cynical now.
And I think that's why January 18th, I was like, wait a second. Oh my God, I thought it happened. Like, I thought it was like in a meeting, like, yeah.
We're trying to have.
I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry. I had to. Oh man, I didn't even mean to do that.
Haley has like the sight or something. I don't know. Like
I'm like the center core crashing into the ocean right now. Like,
oh my gosh.
Oh my God. North Korea got some positive news and had a parade, and Trump was
this
like,
is Trump trying to show he's got a bigger button. Is that what this is?
He's got a bigger button.
And I think that's why people are cynical. That's why people hear Trump ordering a military parade. And
this is exactly why he needs Viagra.
And
I'm sorry. It was January 18th. Oh my God.
So The reality is we don't actually know what this parade's going to look like. But
We don't know
boy,
why
does
he said that either.
Boy, am I filled with misgivings about what this thing is going to actually look like if and when it rolls out, over protesters, in a square of some sort. But
He said it on the same day as a big North Korea parade.
I know. And it was I was reading the article and say, boy, it was inspired
She's
by
still
some
laughing.
Bastille Day kind of display or whatever. She's still laughing. It's still
I
laughing.
know, and
I'll mute me.
you're contagious.
I'm sorry. Sorry.
Right.
Hold on.
Serious face. Serious face.
Let me push up my
Non-conspiracy.
my glasses.
Oh my gosh.
Your giggles are contagious. I can't.
I'll stop. January 18th. All right. Well, I will now say that my confidence in the motivation for this parade has lessened.
Oh, really? I couldn't tell.
Reduce your confidence level. That's what the street epistemologist would say.
Yeah.
I feel like I need to fashion myself a tinfoil hat.
I mean, I was asking before that, like, what's the
I think
point
Glenn
of
Beck
this?
has them for sale.
I mean, what's the point? Is it to raise awareness? No, it is literally to compete with North Korea.
Damn it.
Let me drink some wine.
Oh, come on. He's the most, base kind of instinct sort of person. He's
He's
gonna
a
do
stable
it. Come on.
genius. Come on, Brandon.
Oh, fuck off. I don't want to hear it.
That's the other meaning of FO, by the way. FO.
It's not.
There's a good meme for that, by the way, which I should probably post into the about the stable genius and what Einstein said about his own intelligence. But
send it to me in Messenger. I hate OPs that are memes. Drives me fucking insane. But
we don't want it. We want it to be fermenting opinions, not fomenting opinions. So
yeah, exactly. Ferment, not foment. Yeah. It's an important
come on, someone
distinction.
needs to be offended at least once.
You say anything.
That's the whole purpose of politics, I swear.
It seems like it, yeah. When you're motivated by the spirit of
January 18th. Why are you?
Oh my God! Stop saying. We're crazy. I think so. None of us are filled with confidence. I find myself saying that more and more. It was an expression of one of my college professors that he would be trying to engage the classroom and ask questions and get just dumb answers that are wrong. And he would just say, y'all, I am not filled with confidence by your responses here. And I find as I'm growing older, I find myself saying that more and more, that I'm not filled with confidence. I'm not filled with confidence by Trump's motivations behind this. Or maybe it's all like, just to see the liberals lose their minds when he's talking about having a military parade.
Well, he's a troll.
It's hard to say. Yeah, he's very trollish too. So, whether he really does it or, just wants us to think he does.
The same time, I do have to say that there's really no reason to be filled with confidence about the government in general anyways. Overall, no matter who's running it, no matter who's in Congress, no matter who's the president, regardless.
Well, we should always be skeptical, but I don't personally turn that to a point of hostility because the government is made of
hostile towards it. I'm not hostile towards government.
And that is honestly a conversation for another night. I really would like to get into that. We could maybe do just one night, just a discussion on what do we think is the size of government? What do we think is the role of government in our lives? And
oh fuck, that's gonna be that could go south real quick.
And I will try to keep James sober for that conversation because it'll get ugly fast. Which is another way of saying it'll get ugly fast. But 3 weeks later, and he's Martin Luther on the. But
sorry, very direct.
Yeah. That said, I think we've sort of hit all the points here. I've had a lot of fun talking to you guys tonight.
Me too.
And thank y'all for coming out. You know, anybody who's going to catch us on YouTube after the fact, we try to do this every Wednesday night between 8 and 8:30 Central. You know, we also have the podcast on iTunes and Beyond Pod. We have the Facebook page and group for discussion. If you want to ferment some opinions with us, anybody who's tuning in, please come and join us, and the discussion continues there. But all that said, thank you all for coming out. I'm David Poseidon, and this is Fermenting Opinions. We'll see you next time.
Bye, Dave's parents.
All right. See ya.